thank you for joining us, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. It is a new reality we're in right now, trying to figure out video and webinars and all those things. I know I've had about 5 video calls today, and I hear it's important to look off into the distance, 20 feet or so every 20 minutes. So that's my tip for the day. We hope you're all doing well. Thank you so much for joining us. We have almost 200 participants already registered for this webinar. Thank you to the Chamber of Commerce for hosting. Thank you to Dayna at EDW and the team there, and to Mayor Bowman as well for joining us today. This is going to be, I think, a really important conversation. There are lots of discussions happening out there about business right now. We know that the #1 priority is the health of Winnipeggers, and really that is obviously our first priority. And right after that comes the economy, and that is so important. That's what we want to talk about today, and to hear from some of our leaders in the city about what is happening right now and where we're at. We also want to take your questions. So we are going to be taking your questions. You will have on the bottom of your screen, you should see a Q&A icon. Right in there, you can type in your questions at any time through the hour, and we have our teams that will be monitoring those. We have a few questions that we're going to start with in the beginning, but first I'd like to introduce Jessica Dumas, my co-moderator today, the chair of the Winnipeg Chamber of Commerce. Hi, Jessica.
Hi, Kate. Thanks so much for taking on the lead moderation of this afternoon's event, and thank you so much to Dayna and Mayor Bowman for taking some time to have this valuable conversation with us and our members.
So we can get started right away and introduce a little more formally. So Dayna Spiring, President and CEO of Economic Development Winnipeg, is joining us here today. Hi, Dayna.
Hi, Kate. Good to see you.
Great to see you. And Mayor Brian Bowman joining us. It looks like you're in your office. Are you? I see some of the memorabilia behind you there, sports teams and the Winnipeg sign.
Yeah, I'm in the office. It's good to be here, solo here right now. But it's good to join you. Thanks everybody. Thanks to the Chamber, and thanks Kate, Jessica, and Dayna for doing this. I'm looking forward to the discussion, and thanks to everybody that is joining us today.
Thank you, and we can get started. I'm nighttime downtown Winnipeg, because that's what you can do with technology right now. So we have the Human Rights Museum behind us. So trying to have a little fun with the webinar, but we do want to get into some pretty important topics that we know business owners are facing in Winnipeg right now. But first, what we'd like to start is we'd like to hear from Mayor Brian Bowman, and then from Dayna as well. So Mayor Bowman.
Sure. Thanks very much, Kate. And yeah, I'll keep my comments fairly short because I know we've got a lot of questions to go through. But firstly, I want to start by thanking everybody for all that you're doing in the community right now. I know this is a very unsettling time for all of us as businesses, but also as individuals with our families. And, you know, Winnipeggers are doing what Winnipeggers have always done, and that's support each other, innovate, and try to come out of challenging circumstances or adversity stronger than before. And we will. We know that right now, one of the big questions is, when are we going to recover? And when will the public health orders be lifted? The question I'm raising increasingly is, it's not when, it's how. And because we're not going to go back to where we were before. Businesses are not all going to go back to exactly the same business models. Some are evolving, as we'll talk about. Public health is my #1 priority right now. It's protecting our most vulnerable, but also businesses. And we know, and I've spoken with many people here that are joining us today, that their businesses are being decimated.
It really is a challenging time. Dayna, why don't we go over to you right now, and what are you experiencing and seeing right now and managing with the team?
Well, you know what, we know that businesses are in uncharted territory. We all are. At Economic Development Winnipeg, we're really trying to be the link between government and business and all levels of government. You know, our team has really tried to take a step back and say, how do we be useful during this time? You know, our job is to tell people how great this city is. Our job is to talk about why tourists should come here and see the great attractions that we have, you know, what our competitive advantages are, why you should choose to run your businesses here. But now's not the time for that. And now we're really hunkering down and trying to help businesses understand the resources that are available to help them through this. Now is not the time that we're focused on growth or on, you know, promoting the great value that our city has to offer. Right now, we're focused on survival. And we're trying to re-equip our team to be there to help businesses work through various programs, understand some of the issues that they're facing. And as the mayor alluded to, we're now starting to talk about recovery. We're starting to talk about what that looks like, what we have to start planning for. We know that things are going to change. We know that social distancing is not something that is going to be yesterday's news, a month from now. So we've got to figure out how we adapt those things into our business and how we make sure that government is giving us the direction that we need as businesses to go forward. And we're here to try to bring everybody together. Our business community is our secret sauce, and we are coming together to share ideas. We're coming together to talk about issues, and through the mayor's task force and other initiatives, businesses are able to raise those concerns up to all levels of government and enable us to work as a team to act quickly.
Thank you. And I think that's one thing that we see in Winnipeg regularly, but especially right now. I can speak to the collaboration that I've seen. We're always on the phone together with our various organizations and teams, and a direct line with the city of Winnipeg. And I know, Mayor Bowman, your whole team has been working around the clock to try and figure this out, because there are no real answers all the time. This is new for everyone as we try to navigate this. And so we do want to get into some questions, and I just want to remind everyone, our participants on this call, you can enter in your questions at any point using the Q&A icon, but I'm going to pass it over to Jessica to get started with our conversation today.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Kate, and thank you very much for those opening comments from both of you. Thank you very much for your leadership throughout this time. My first question is for Mayor Bowman. Health is definitely priority, and many of our members in our community are small business owners or business owners in general. Can you share with us, outline the steps that the city has taken so far to help reduce financial burden on Winnipeg businesses right now, and maybe some other ideas that you're looking at from a civic perspective?
Thanks very much, Jessica. And I want to thank the members of the Business Task Force, as well as the Chamber and Economic Development Winnipeg. I mean, Dayna and her team have been doing outstanding work, and they've been an invaluable resource. They've always been invaluable, but their value to the business community and to government right now is incredibly important. And so she has stepped up, as she always does, to help act as that bridge, and someone who's has kind of that sage advice. What we've done, so firstly, I mean, emergency management is not something there's a manual that you get, or how do you deal with COVID-19 for any of us, including government decision makers. And so you're right, priority one for our emergency management team has been to work collaboratively with other levels of government, most notably Manitoba Health. And we're doing everything we can to support them right now, because they're the lead. In terms of business, what we did immediately after the public health orders, and keep in mind, we've only been in this for a month, and it's going to go on longer. But what we did is we had to do a couple of things. One, we had to make sure that there was business continuity at the city, to make sure our procurement and our capital investments move forward, to make sure that the economic driver that government can be sometimes is not shut down. The other was the business and property tax deferral plan that we brought to council. So it's not you don't need to pay taxes, but it does provide 3 months delay for those that can't pay their taxes, because we know the liquidity and we know the cash flow crunch is very acute for many. And it's not going to be the single answer to helping businesses, but it's one lever within municipal jurisdiction. And the other is just working collaboratively with stakeholders. I mean, Kate and Dave Pensato from the Exchange Biz were lobbying us on what could we do that's innovative right now on the parking front. And so the new temporary loading zones in the Exchange downtown to help with takeout and skip the dishes and other food delivery providers was one practical way. The other was businesses, and increasingly a lot of people are working from home, and the residential parking rules weren't built for COVID. And so we had to make some changes there to allow people to leave their cars on the street and not be ticketed during the day, because we're saying go home and then you're getting ticketed for it. So we're going to continue to keep an open mind and get the input on additional things that we can do. And all the while we're making sure that, while we're bleeding money as well, it's not the same as it is for businesses with government, but we are, right now we're losing about 6 million a month on transit and about a 6 million elsewhere in the budget. So, keep in mind, 12 million might not seem like a lot to other levels of government. A 1% property tax increase, which I'm not supporting, but just to put in context, that's just under $5 million. So it's a lot the longer this goes, and that's where services get impacted.
And I think, Mayor Bowman, when you're looking at really those creative, innovative ways that you're trying to do, when you don't have a lot of budget and a lot of movement at the municipal level to do things, you did mention the tax deferral, which we know is a great support for businesses. And you did mention the parking as well. So we were really thankful to work with the city and Exchange District Biz on that. I was really impressed at how quickly we were able to put that together. There is something you have to be really nimble about. Looking ahead, Dayna did mention the recovery, that we need to start thinking about that. The 1 hour free parking and those curbside pickup zones, that has been beneficial for restaurants and retail that are trying to operate their businesses online. Is that something that you could see extended, or is it just sort of an immediate crisis thing?
Sorry, was that a question for me or for Dayna?
Oh, sorry, Mayor, but that is for you.
Yeah, okay. You know what? I actually think we should be looking at what's working during the pandemic well, and look to see if some of these things can be permanent. I think there's going to be a lot of things. I mean, we just announced an initiative with the United Way Winnipeg where as of now, older Winnipeggers can call 311 and be connected with services, outside city services, to help with meal delivery and help with medications. And so there's a lot there. I mean, there's a lot of things that we're learning. I'm glad to hear you say that you recognize the city was nimble, because that's not always an accusation of any level of government. And I think all three levels of government are doing the best they can. And there've been some real successes that each can point to. And of course, what I would think the business community would want to see is that nimbleness and the innovation that we're seeing from all levels of government continue well beyond the pandemic. And that's something I'm committed to doing, is looking at, like, I'm not expecting us to just then go back to the way it was, because it's not. There's going to be improvements. The loading zones, if that's one that's working, why would we go back? So we'll be open to it.
Jessica, back over to you.
Thank you. It's I think it's been really interesting and kind of fascinating also to look at different things that are happening around the world with change, with how everyone is able to find ways to adjust and make things happen. So Mayor Bowman, you're in regular contact with other levels of government, and I imagine experts from all over the place. Can you share us some of the insights into conversations or ideas that you're having about what else is happening elsewhere and what can happen here in Winnipeg to again support local business?
You know, a lot of the, so I am in regular contact with federal and provincial officials, also with mayors across Canada. So most days I'm on the phone with colleagues from the other big cities. And earlier this afternoon, I know before we went on, I was mentioning that I'm part of a Bloomberg leadership initiative. And so we are this afternoon, we spent some time with Bill Gates and Michael Bloomberg. And so also with some of the health officials that helped during previous pandemics under the previous administration in the White House. And what I'm hearing from a lot of them is to, what is special about Winnipeg is our connectivity to each other. And that's what a lot of other cities right now are trying to replicate. They're trying to build those connections so that the partnerships, I mean, the only way you get things done in Winnipeg is by partnering, and it's usually 1 or 2 phone calls away. And right now, that's a massive advantage to us to be nimble. We're seeing that. We're also seeing the benefits of a 4-year balanced budget, because other cities aren't positioned for that, and they're trying to balance their budget for next year right now. And they are in a horrible position that we're not in. We're still going to have a squeeze, but it's not the same as you're hearing from other cities that are talking about bankruptcy.
We do have questions that are starting to come in now, but Dayna, I'd like to ask you something just before we get to some of the participant questions that are starting to roll in here. Can you give us some insight from EDWs, you know, if we're looking at the team and how this pandemic is impacting Winnipeg specifically, when you're looking at the sectors and those key sectors that are really important for our city, are there any that are most at risk right now?
Well, it's a great question, Kate, and we've got a great market intelligence team at Economic Development Winnipeg, and they're trying to, you know, begin to analyze the impact of this on our economy. And it's still early days, so that economic impact isn't yet available, but we are looking to all the sector councils. We're communicating with them. We're looking at Stats Canada data. You know, we know the jobs numbers that came out earlier this week. They're tough, and you know, we know that they're going to get worse. These are early March numbers we got, and we know that the April ones are going to be worse. 22,000 jobs were lost in services. 1,300 jobs were lost. 2,200 jobs were down. And, you know, those are mid-March numbers, 22,000. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes crooked here. But we know that what's important is that we keep our agriculture, our food, and our medical supply chains functioning well. And right now, agriculture is booming. And people are at home, people are buying more groceries, there's things that are happening. So we've got to make sure those supply chains, you know, do well. Manufacturing is struggling for a couple reasons. One, we're seeing that employees are nervous. You know, they're getting messages from all of their elected officials to stay home. Stay home, it's not safe for you to be out, and please just, you know, don't leave your homes. On the flip side, we've also said there are critical industries that we need to ensure are continuing to work to keep that pilot light of our economy going. And so there's got to be a balance there. And I don't think we've done a great job yet of creating the balance and understanding, you know, that employees that are asked to go to work have some real concerns. How do we communicate to them, you know, the right way to go to work and what needs to happen for them to be safe, but yet continue to do those critical services that we need for our economy to run? You know, we've talked a lot over the last couple of years in manufacturing around lean manufacturing or just-in-time supply chains. Those work really well until there's a pandemic. And then just-in-time is way, way, way too late. So we've seen some manufacturers that are running into some of those issues, and you know, whether it's supply chain or whether it's employee issues, we're continuing to watch our manufacturing sector. I think that's something that that is going to have some issues. Our technology sector is doing well if they're service providers. So, you know, we know that Bold Commerce is having some pretty busy and good days from a business perspective. You know, Skip the Dishes as well. But when we look at things like gaming companies and people that are asking consumers to buy goods or buy kind of more of those discretionary items, you know, when cash flows are tight, people aren't going to buy those. So that's something that we've got to look at. Tech is a very broad industry, and some are going to do well during this period, and others are you know, going to have a harder time. So we're continuing to monitor it. You know, ag is strong. Manufacturing, we've got to keep watching, and aerospace, you know, was down a little bit before COVID and is not yet in a position to bounce back. There's areas that we're going to see some growth, and we're going to be positioned for growth. But there's a lot of pressure on that industry, you know, given the travel restrictions and the fact that people don't want to travel these days.
Your team really is having to look ahead so far and figure out what's going to happen with the different sectors where there's opportunity and also greater risk.
Yeah, and also understanding what others are doing. We were on the phone with the Winnipeg Airport Authority a couple hours ago, and they talked about how, you know, Air Canada and WestJet are taking some lines of aircraft out of the mix. And when they shut those down, it's not a light switch to get them back up and running. It's a process. And so as they continue to shut those down, that tells us a little bit about the runway that we're going to have to manage through.
Thanks. Jessica, I think you have a question from one of the participants. We can get started on those. It looks like they're really starting to come in here, folks. There are over 200 participants on the call, which is just fantastic. Wow. There's a real interest here. So we want to make sure that we do have time to get your questions. We did have some questions prepared for Mayor Bowman and for Dayna, but I think if we can try and keep up with your questions as you're participating on this call, let's try and do that. So Jessica, if you've got one over there.
I do, yeah. This is from Jackie's story. So hi, Jackie. She's with Lakeview Hotels and Resorts. Her question is in regards to the accommodation tax that hotels are currently collecting. Has the option of it being deferred considered as a relief for these priorities that are struggling with occupancies and cash flow?
I can take that. The short answer is not formally, but all options are on the table going forward. We're waiting for an analysis from our public service on the city's finances and city's options in terms of how we can better support industry. The lines of communication have been open with a number of industries, and I wouldn't rule anything out. I think a large part is going to depend on how long this goes, and we're kind of positioning and preparing ourselves for that reality. So I wouldn't rule anything out.
The one thing, if I may add to that, we are obviously in very close contact with the Hotel Association, and Tourism Winnipeg is dependent on our hotel community to celebrate our city and be there for us on the good times. So we are painfully aware of the pain that our hotels and our tourism industry across the city are feeling. And as much as we're trying to keep that pilot light of our economy going, we know that our tourism assets right now are shut down, and there is no opportunity to keep that pilot light going for them. So that's something that we're very mindful of at Economic Development Winnipeg. I know that the city is challenging us to think about those things too, and to think about how we start to rebuild this tourism economy as we come out of this.
Dayna, that might be a good segue to the next question around events in Tourism Winnipeg. And we do have a question from Lynn for the mayor, but I think, Dayna, maybe we can start with you and talk about events and the impact that it's having on tourism. Lynn is asking about special event permits specifically, that they've been canceled until the end of June. And she's wondering if there's an expectation that is going to be extended further. Obviously, we don't have all the answers, but Dayna, maybe if you can talk a little bit about some of the implications on tourism around events, and then we can talk with Mayor Bowman about some of the permitting processes and the challenges around that.
Yeah, that's great. Special events are one of the things that as Winnipeggers we're great with, right? We talk about our festival season, whether it's folk festival, jazz festival, folklorama. I mean, this is an incredible place to be in the summer, Fringe Festival downtown. The difficulty with tourism is that it's predicated on meetings and conventions and people coming together to learn together or celebrate together. And right now it's not safe to be together. So we need to think about how we position ourselves, and we're social beings, and we're going to want to get together again. And I know, this week it was announced the folk festival is canceled for this year, and we'll turn our attention to next year. But those are things that we're going to want to do. So in this downtime, how do we best position ourselves to go forward? And our team is continuing to look at events that we can try to attract here in 2021, 22, 23, 24, 25. We're looking at conventions. We're looking at events. We're looking at, what Winnipeg is well suited to host. And even though we can't be, doing that right now, we want to make sure that our attractions and our hotels and our whole tourism community is playing into these decisions on where we focus our efforts and what we can get here. We had great events like the Heritage Classic, and those are winter events, and those are different things. What's next for us? I mean, maybe it's the NHL draft. Maybe it's, something we've never had before. We've looked at the Red Bull exciting winter events. All those are on the table. We're brainstorming, and that's how we're going to start to position ourselves for the other side of this.
That's great. And Mayor, I was just going to say, someone had wanted me to ask you when hockey was going to start again, and I responded that I didn't think you'd be able to answer that question, but maybe after the Bombers. So
when football starts, I'd like to start there.
Yeah.
Exactly right. So one of them's got to go first, but no one knows the date. Yeah. So Mayor Bowman, around special events and permitting, how are you managing those decisions at the city around permits and when they might be looking at being approved again?
That was one of the more difficult decisions that had to be made at the city to cancel special events and those permits, because it's as Dayna articulated really well, it's such a huge part of our economy. It's also a big part of who we are. And I've been going to the folk festival for well over 25 years, and I'm actually really bummed out that it's not going on this year. So if it's the Lynn that I think it is asking that question, I don't know if it's Lynn Scromata, but I'll just say that we're taking our direction from Manitoba Health. And so the reason why we're working so hard to enforce the public health orders, and we've announced the closures of some of, everything from skate parks to playgrounds, isn't because we don't want people congregating and having fun and children laughing and playing, but we want to try ending this as fast as possible so that we don't have to extend that that cancellation. So we'll know based on the direction that we're getting and the results that we're getting. Where I'm hoping we can increasingly focus our discussions on isn't when, it's how. And I don't think there's going to be there's no one big switch in my office that we're going to turn on. It's there's multiple levers at the municipal level, multiple levers at provincial and federal that will all start to be triggered, and how we roll back to a greater sense of normalcy and how we stage that is going to be informed in part based on the dialogue that we're having with everybody here today and in the future, because there are some industries, restaurants in particular, who have very narrow margins. I'm hoping that could be one of the early liftings and relaxing a little bit, just to start helping with their cash flows. But with the end of June date right now, we don't know yet.
Yeah, and that's fair. It's always trying to figure out and do our best guesses right now based on the evidence. And as we know, the evidence keeps changing and the information that is available to us. So we can only make decisions with the information, the evidence that we have. So I can imagine how challenging it is and how difficult it is, especially you mentioned restaurants, absolutely, and the tourism industry, Dayna, that you mentioned, and the hotels and the real struggle that's happening there. Jessica, I think you might have another question for the mayor or for Dayna.
I do have another question that came in from one of our listeners. This is from Sean Hogan, the social enterprise manager of Build. He says, recently the CEO of Canada's largest bank called on social enterprise to be part of the reboot of the economy in a post-COVID-19 world. Would the city of Winnipeg join other cities across the country in implementing social procurement, requiring inclusion of social enterprises in the public tendering process while supporting community benefits like local hiring? For Mayor Bowman.
So that's something that we've been working on, and I've been a huge proponent of supporting local, and that's one of the local stakeholder groups that I want to see increasing collaboration and procurement going to. And so the challenge we always have is working within existing trade agreements and what's lawful under those agreements, which are signed by other levels of government. And so we'll continue. If anyone on this call has suggestions on how we can do that, we're in regular dialogue with our asset management and our procurement professionals to look at how we support social enterprise and more importantly, the stakeholders they serve. So absolutely open to that.
Thank you.
Dayna, a question for you around part of EDW's role and the shifting that your team has had to make around recruitment. How do you see that function of, you mentioned it earlier, a big part of EDW's role is to recruit new businesses to come to Winnipeg to set up here. How is that shift happening, and how are you adapting to that? What do you see that look like going forward? Is that something that we need to really be focusing right now on the businesses here, or can that help the economy in the future as well?
Kate, I think it's a delicate balance. So right now is not the time for us to be going out saying, hey, come to Winnipeg. We've got great things to offer. Come check out our city. But it is an opportunity for us to reach out proactively to, branches of the Canadian government in other jurisdictions. We've got the consular services and global affairs who we interact with all the time. And we're working with them to help them understand the benefits that are in Winnipeg, so that when companies in their jurisdictions are looking at expansion or looking at opportunities, Winnipeg's top of mind. So we do have team members today reaching out to those global affairs staff members and helping to sell Winnipeg, helping to educate them on this place in the center of Canada that we want people to come and see. That work is happening now. We're also looking at, what manufacturers are using suppliers that are outside of our city, that are maybe in the United States or in jurisdictions that are further away. are there opportunities to bring some of those suppliers to Winnipeg and get their supply chain a little bit more locally focused? We're looking at those things. So, those are kind of the questions that we're starting to ask. But our primary objective right now is to help our Winnipeg companies survive through this pandemic. And if that means helping them get in touch with government programming, helping them to understand, what resources are available to them. If one company needs masks and another company is shut down but has masks, how do we connect them to make sure that, those critical services can keep running? And once we get through, we're going to be in a better position to help our economy grow. And we will get through this. So it is that question of what are the baby steps we can take today? How do we lay the foundation to be able to launch when our economy starts to go again? And all that work is being done behind the scenes.
Thank you. Jessica, do you have another question there that you'd like to ask?
I do. I have another question for the mayor. A few people in the Q&A are asking about infrastructure. Some are suggesting that the city should reduce spending. Some are suggesting we could spend more to stimulate the economy. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we just passed the 4-year balanced budget, and infrastructure was part of, obviously, the capital budget. A couple things. Our budgets are different than provincial and federal in that we're not legally allowed to borrow money for our operating budget, and that's where all the services are provided. And so when we do borrow, it's for the capital budget. And when we borrow, the way in which we pay that back is through property taxes, by and large. And so if we wanted to increase, we could. It would just mean that we would be increasingly looking at property taxes and businesses to pay more and pay it back. And so right now there is political pressure to slow the infrastructure investments to free up some dollars. And that's something that concerns me because I want to see those contracts going out. We pump a lot of money and a lot of jobs are generated in Winnipeg in the construction industry. That is as a direct result of the investments that we're making to build Winnipeg for the future. And so I'm very sensitive to making those reductions, which are being discussed at the political level right now. And I'd be concerned about that. I'm also concerned about increasing because somebody's got to pay it. I mean, we can spend your money, you're going to have to pay it back as taxpayers. And right now, I'm not sure doubling down and increasing the tax burden coming out of this is going to help businesses and homeowners at a time when they don't have a lot of extra discretionary income to spend on taxes.
Thank you.
Mayor Bowman, when we're talking about the financial situation and looking at the 4-year budget that council passed, it's the first time you have done a 4-year budget, that the city has a 4-year budget and balanced. So when you're looking at that, what changes or things do you need to think about differently? Does it put the city in a good position with what's happening right now as you look ahead?
Yeah, it's the first. I mean, this is historic. The city of Winnipeg has never balanced 4 years going forward. It really is a historic accomplishment, and it couldn't have happened any sooner because what it does is what we had projected as a structural operating deficit for next year's budget was just over $121 million. Now, that's about 10% of our overall budget. I mean, the budget's 1.14, if my memory is correct, billion. And so right now we would be working on finding $121 million in savings or increasing your taxes for a budget that would have to be passed about 8 months from now. And so we're not doing that. We can focus on COVID and the revenue and the expenditure, implications of dealing with COVID. And that's going to be challenging enough. But what we're not doing is we're not trying to find $121 million in your pockets or in reducing our services to you at a time when that would not be welcome. So we did the heavy lifting politically in the multi-year budget for those that followed. It wasn't easy. And there's a reason why nobody's done it before, because it's really difficult. But it does put us in a better shape than many other municipalities in Canada, including some of the other big cities that right now are making a lot of noise because they are in bad shape. I mean, and I cite, even you look at some of the municipalities in Alberta, I mean, they were hit very hard in advance because of oil prices and the pipeline issues. I mean, when I talk to the mayors of Calgary and Edmonton, Vancouver, they have much heavier lifting to do than I think we do, just because the conditions were more stable for us going into the COVID pandemic.
Jessica, I've got a question here for Dayna, unless you've got another one lined up.
I do. This one is regarding the arts, culture, and heritage sector, but it will relate to many of us. The tourism specifically industry has been hit hard. As we look towards recovery, what are your thoughts on seeing audience event size with regards to limits in the future? What will that look like?
Oh, is that Dayna? You should take that one. You know what? I mean, we want to see massive. I mean, I want to see massive audiences. I want to see everybody spending as much as you can. If you've got the means right now, I want to see you spending money on local restaurants. I want to see you spending on local retailers right now who are hurting. You know, and the events will absolutely need us to show up and to support, including our arts community. I mean, they're shut down right now, and so you know, we gave everybody what I'll call a haircut of 10%, but the funding certainty of 4 years. So they've got that stability now of a commitment from the city. Normally that, you know, you go cap in hand on an annual basis, but to be able to have 4 years provides something that I'm hoping they'll be able to leverage from other levels of government who do cash in good economic times. We don't the same way. And so, you know, what I've been doing is lobbying provincial and federal officials that you collect PST, GST, income tax in good times. So you got to be there for Canadians and Canadian businesses when they need it, because you can also borrow in ways that we can't. You can borrow for your operating. We're legally not allowed to under the provincial legislation. So I'm going to continue to do that. And one sector that really needs the support from provincial in particular is our arts and culture and heritage sector, because they're helping get us through this, just in terms of the arts and culture and that human connectivity right now. But they're an important part of our economy in Winnipeg, and they're going to be, we need them to be strong coming out of this. And I know right now they're not.
Thank you.
Dayna, did you have anything you wanted to add on that? If not, I'm going to switch gears for you to in a completely another direction, but I want to give you a chance to speak to that before we do.
Well, I would just say that, you know, we're looking at all of those events and you know, our institutions like the ballet and the symphony and the theater and all the things that we're so proud of. You know, we're going to have to wait to get direction from Dr. Roussin or others to say, this is what's safe and this is how you go back. And you know, I laugh because you'd love to be able to say, well, next fall we're going to go back and we're all going to sit in MTC and we're going to watch a great show. But we've got to be cognizant of the fact that, you know, there's going to be social distancing and there's going to be implications for us, and we might slowly be able to ratchet those back, but I think we're all committed to the fact that we're going to follow the advice of experts and we're going to do the right thing, because that's going to get us out of this faster.
Great, thank you.
If I can just build on that very briefly, we had the big city mayors had a call with Chryssia Freeland early on in the pandemic. She's been accessible to us almost on a weekly basis. And I don't think she'd mind me saying this, but she said, we understand and appreciate that in order to combat COVID, we basically have to shut down the economy. And what all of us are trying to do is not accept that black and white scenario, herself included, saying, okay, governments are telling everybody, if you want to help protect the health and safety of your family and our community, you have to wind down your businesses, essentially go home and stay away from everybody. But at the same time, we know that has, you know, the impact that it's having on businesses. And so where governments have an incredibly important role is mitigating those effects right now. And that's what you see being played out at all three levels of government, is using the tools and resources each of us have. How do we mitigate that? And that's what we're trying to do.
And we really are seeing, as the economy has had to shift, but really seeing rapid innovation that this is forcing. The businesses are figuring out other ways. EDW, I know Dayna has had some really great success stories that you've been sharing there about how our local businesses are adapting, whether it's moving to online or figuring out how to make new products. And it's really, it's inspiring to see, knowing that innovation can happen so quickly. And I think one of the questions that's coming in here for you, Dayna, is around, I think, manufacturing and aerospace specifically, but it's an interesting question that would like to get your take on. They're asking what will be the impact of the closing of the Composites Innovation Center, CIC, on our manufacturing and aerospace sectors. Their work was critical to a number of companies and helped sell our Winnipeg story and our commitment to innovation.
Yeah, it was disappointing news to hear that the Composites Innovation Center was closing, and they have a lot of talented people that were there and working on manufacturing projects. So there will be a gap left by the CIC. There is no question about that. But I think that the opportunity for us is, how do we take the expertise that group of people had, and how do we take the connections that group of people had and reinsert them into the economy? We were talking with Precision ADM this morning on some of the great projects that they're working on and some of the opportunities they have to serve governments and serve our community in the middle of this pandemic. And they've talked about opportunities for some of the engineers that were at CIC to come and broaden their base of expertise and to be able to use them to further some of the projects they're working on. In Winnipeg, we do great things, and there are great businesses that are going to have a huge success. And I think this pandemic is an opportunity for us to look at what we do really, really well. And it's also another opportunity for us to collaborate as a community and work together. So I know Precision ADM is looking at some opportunities. They've brought in 2 other Winnipeg companies to work with them and offer their areas of expertise. I look at a company like Price Industries, and I think so many Winnipeggers don't know the extent of the technology that Price has. I mean, they have surgical curtains that they can create with air, blocking germs going from person to person. So if you're a doctor operating on a patient, they can use HVAC to block anything coming out of the doctor's mouth from getting on that patient, right? We look at those technologies. They've been used in hospitals for years, but maybe there's opportunities for that technology to be in office buildings, or to be in schools, or to be in universities. And we're going to start to see that. And that's innovation that's Winnipeg born, right? Those are the exciting things. So, the CIC is going to be, there's going to be a gap, but there's going to be opportunities to take that expertise and insert them into companies like Price Industries, companies like Precision ADM. And we're going to build some great innovations coming out of this pandemic. That is what we do. We innovate in this city.
I absolutely do. Jessica, I think you might have another question for the mayor to follow up on. And I think it's a good segue too, when we're looking at what we do in the city and how we work together.
Definitely. I've been to the Price Industry, their building in Winnipeg, and it's completely fascinating. So that doesn't surprise me. That's super exciting to hear that. I love it. Mm-hmm. So one little note for Mayor Bowman. Sean Hogan says he'd love the chance to sit down with your team to discuss the legalities of social procurement. My question is going to be for both Dayna and for Mayor Bowman. I'd like to hear your thoughts with regards to truth and reconciliation. How does this pandemic impact the city's reconciliation efforts? And how can reconciliation be an integral part of the economic rebuild for the city and for everyone?
Well, first I'll say, if anybody wants a meeting, you just go to mayorbowman.ca and put a request in. And I'm always open to that. So if anybody has something they're not able to get in on in the discussion and you'd like to meet, I'd welcome that opportunity. Couple thoughts on reconciliation. I'm very concerned about the impacts of COVID in our Indigenous community. And I see that the provincial government today took some steps to limit travel to northern Manitoba in order to protect predominantly Indigenous communities. And I think that makes a lot of sense. In the city of Winnipeg, it's a real concern for me. And I know it's a concern if you talk to people on the front lines of different sectors, it's a concern. In terms of reconciliation, I mean, our reconciliation work has to continue, and this is a Canadian effort. I think we will be judged in our generation based on how we responded or not to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action. So I'll use this opportunity to urge everybody on this that's part of this engagement right now if you haven't joined the Winnipeg's Indigenous Accord, please do so, because that's one way in which you can start implementing your own actions. I think there's a lot of lessons we can learn from our Indigenous community. I mean, if you look at how our Indigenous community for thousands and thousands of years mastered an inhospitable climate here, they did it by working together. They did it by innovating. And so I think there's a lot of lessons that Winnipeggers can and need to continue to learn from our Indigenous community. And I think the more we do that, the healthier we'll be as a community.
Thank you very much, Dayna.
You know what, I think there's going to be great opportunities as we come out of this pandemic for growth and for changing the way that our economy is typically run. We are very proudly a signatory on the Mayor's Indigenous Accord, and we know that there is a recognition among business that we have to be more inclusive, and we have to find opportunities, you know, to really engage with the Indigenous population and make sure that there are opportunities that are real for them in this economy. And I think that as we continue to evolve, and as, you know, some of the old ways of doing things are thrown out the window, whether it's because of a pandemic or other ways, that also means there's opportunities for a new way of doing things and new perspectives and new ideas. So I'm hopeful that you know, there's enough people that understand that there will be opportunities on the other side of this. And I know at Economic Development Winnipeg, you know, we will continue to work with our team to make sure that they understand some of those principles. And Jessica, you know very well that that we're trying to learn and make sure that we are keeping some of those principles top of mind. And we're gonna make sure that we look for opportunities and encourage that, because I think the Mayor is right. I mean, this is the time, and we're all working with that same goal in mind.
Thank you very much.
And I think just before I get to another question from one of our participants, when we're looking at, you know, Downtown Winnipeg Biz is also a proud partner of the Accord, and we've really tried to create a shift that lens and the reconciliation is worked through everything that we do, that it's not something that you start or stop, and it's not a special project, that it really is part of who we are, how we hire, what are we doing out in the community in our downtown. And I think we need to have that lens as we look through the recovery phase and what we're doing in building those partnerships. We talked a lot this past 45 minutes about collaboration and relationships, and it's really important that we're reaching out to everyone. Dayna, you mentioned inclusion. That really is so important during this time, that we are working together so Winnipeg can come out stronger at the end of this when we do get to the other side. Dayna, I have another question for you that's an interesting one from Thomas, actually. Can EDW work with local museums and arts groups to help measure or benchmark the local economic impact of these entities and build strategies for planned recovery? So a very different look at some of the sectors that we've been talking around ag and manufacturing. So definitely an interesting question about how that might fit.
Yeah, Thomas, great question. You know, we work with a lot of festivals and events on what their economic impact is. It's very difficult to measure the economic impact of Assiniboine Park or the economic impact of the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. We typically take that when we look at the construction and look at the jobs and things that surround that to really get an economic impact. What we're doing though is we're understanding the value that all of those assets have in our community. You know, we're measuring what their contributions can be and how we position those when we're inviting people to come and see our city. You know, Assiniboine Park is a great one because it's such a diverse attraction, whether you're going to the children's park, whether you're going to the zoo. You know, soon we're going to have the diversity gardens, and we're looking to attract meetings and conventions for people that are horticulturists and gardeners, and we've never been able to focus on that area before, and that's where we see, you know, exponential economic impact. If I can bring a group of horticulturists to Winnipeg, they're not only going to see our city, they're going to spend money while they're here, they're going to be able to publicize and promote these great attractions that we have, and the economic impact is going to be immediate and it's going to be significant. So we're looking at those opportunities, we're looking for ways to do that, we're looking for ways to really elevate, you know, some of the incredible attractions that we have. And you know, I think about the Forks and the market there and the history that is in that place. I think about the Museum for Human Rights and how fortunate we are to have a building that is focused on, you know, highlighting human rights. I think about Assiniboine Park, and those are those are attractions that so few cities of our size, especially, are fortunate enough to have. So, my team is tasked, even in the middle of this pandemic, for trying to find ways to showcase them and trying to find ways to get more people to experience them. I encourage Winnipeggers, when the doors start to open and we start to come back to normal, there are a very small percentage of Winnipeggers who go through the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, which is shocking to me. But those are things that maybe now we're missing, and maybe those are some things that we're going to put on our list for when this is done, because we all have a role to play in being ambassadors and being able to talk about the great things that we have in our city. And the more we talk about those stories, the more we're going to be able to attract tourists and visitors and economic growth right here at home.
Thank you. Jessica, we're nearing the end of our time here. We still have a few more minutes. If you've got one more question for the mayor, and then we've got a couple other things to wrap up here around arts funding, I think, as well as some final questions, and then a wrap up.
Okay, I'm going between two questions. Which one should I ask? Okay, this is what I'm going to ask. What is the biggest challenge that the city is facing? And what assistance or resources do you need in order to help you address this challenge?
Oh boy. I guess I'll interpret that question as, what is the municipal government, the biggest challenge the municipal government is facing? Okay. Because we could certainly canvass the business community. So I guess the key thing is really just the resources that we're going to need to keep our lights on as a city. So I mentioned 12 million a month. That's a rough estimate in the early days. And we are very actively trying to get direct funding from the federal government, along with other big cities. There hasn't been the engagement on that topic from the provincial government, notwithstanding the fact that we're legal creatures of the provincial government. And so I'm pleased that the federal government has been open to that dialogue. We want to make sure that the services that Winnipeggers expect and need, like first responders, like clean, safe drinking water, like roads that increasingly we know need to be repaired, that they can continue. And so municipalities at the federal level are really making the case to the federal government for direct financial support to cities. So that is a pressing matter for us as a municipal government right now.
Great. And we've got one more question that I mentioned around arts funding, and Mayor, this is for you as well. We have a few participants wondering if the city can increase grants to help organizations who aren't making any ticket sale revenue right now. Obviously the budget is a challenge, but is that something that you're able to look at?
It's unlikely that the grants would go up. We've actually been contracting our grants modestly in the last number of years. And of course, like I said, when you look at the structures of municipal governments and how we derive our income to make sure the services are there, we are not structured, and I wish we were, and I've been lobbying for that for 6 years. We don't have we have a funding model that's based on property taxes. And so strictly speaking, economic growth and development, strictly speaking, is one in which other levels of government cash in on. I would love to have skin in the game for that and change the funding model. And if that's something that could change at the provincial level right now, we'd be having a very different conversation. And I think we would be able to do a lot more than we're doing right now.
Thank you. And we know you are advocating, you've mentioned, especially at the federal level, and having regular conversations as well to advocate for increased support. As we wrap things up here, a question for you, Dayna, and then for both of you, and then I'm going to pass it back to Jessica to conclude our hour. Dayna, is there anything that you feel that is missing right now for businesses in terms of support that all of us, our sectors, our industries should be coming together to advocate for? Is there anything like that? And I'd also like to know what each of you are doing individually. I mean, obviously your organizations are working around the clock to support businesses right now. EDW has a great resource toolkit online when you have pointed people that are getting to know the programs and the supports that are available, and really direct support there. And Mayor Bowman, you mentioned the deferral program. We now have the community ambassadors out on the street as well to work together in physical distancing and the advocacy efforts. So is there anything missing? And just as we wrap up here, what are each of you focused on individually?
So I would tell you that I don't think there's any big pieces that are missing right now. You know, we've got an influx of information. There's been an influx of programs. Right now, I think companies need to figure out what applies to them and how do they take advantage of that and what does that look like. And that information is changing, so they've got to be on top of it. But that's where, you know, constant communication, constant collaboration. We're going to continue with much of the same. You know, I think as we start to get through the peak of this crisis, and I hope that we're at the peak, you know, we're going to have to start talking about recovery and how we do that and how we decide how we go back to work and what social distancing needs to happen and what the protocols should be. I mean, that's going to take all of our effort as a team to come together and share best practices. You know, we are able to do things in Winnipeg that other big cities can't because CEOs are one phone call away. And I know that when the mayor asked people to get, you know, to come around a table to share their ideas and help, you know, elevate issues, people respond within the hour. That is the secret sauce of our city. That is the greatest thing. And that will carry us out of this. So we've got more work to do. I don't think there's anything new. I think we've got to keep doing what we're doing. And we're going to have to, you know, work even harder as we come out of this, because that's where the collaboration is going to start to pay dividends, you know, much quicker.
So I'll try to be very quick because I know time is limited for everybody, but the top level, kind of high level things that I'm really focused on right now is our own finances, so we can make sure the services are there for residents, especially now. We're focused on working with other levels of government to make sure we're supporting them. You know, the provincial government has a big job to do right now to protecting the health of Winnipeggers and Manitobans, and we need them to be successful. And we're working really hard to make sure that we're a collaborative, a supportive level of government working with them. At the federal level, quite frankly, we want their money. And that's what we're really lobbying for, because I want to make sure that we, again, have the supports for our community. You know, the running joke is always the federal government has all the money, the provincial government has all the power, and municipal government does all the work. Now, that is a broad brush stroke because they're all doing work right now, especially in the healthcare. But we're going to continue to lobby and work with other levels of government. Closer to home, though, it's protecting our vulnerable and protecting our business community in the short and the long term. In the short term, we've tried to offer some relief. We'll continue to look for ways in which we can have work practically, whether it's the loading zones or other things. We'll continue to be open-minded and would welcome the input from everybody here and that may hear about this conversation. And then more importantly, as Dayna has rightfully pointed out, we will get through this as a community and we will come out stronger. And I'm looking at, and I know our council colleagues are looking at, how do we position the city of Winnipeg to do what we all want to do is come out stronger and as a stronger level of government that can support business success. And those are kind of the high level things that we're doing. As a family right now, our kids are at home. Tracy's homeschooling them. She's working full time from home. I don't know how she's doing it. I don't know how, like, I do not get it. So we're doing the same juggling thing that a lot of people are doing, but we're fortunate that we have a stable home. That's a safe space for everybody, and we're getting through it. But there's a lot of people out there who don't have that, and so that's why when I say protecting our vulnerable community, there's a lot of different definitions about what are vulnerable, and so I hope as a community our empathy level is, if you ignore Twitter and the trolls and things like that, I hope our empathy for each other is growing out of this. I hope our resilience is growing. I hope our innovation is growing. And I think it is. I've been really proud of how Winnipeggers are responding. I've been really proud of how other levels of government are working. Everybody is doing their absolute best because we care about each other. So we'll get through this and we'll be stronger at the end of the day.
I can't think of a better note to end this on. Thank you everyone for watching. We did not get to everyone's questions, so I know the Chamber team will work hard to go through them with our Downtown Winnipeg Biz team and EDW as well, to go through those and do any follow-up that may be necessary. We do have a final note here from Louise Dayna at CMHR that wanted to let you know that so far almost half of Winnipeggers have attended the museum, which is right behind me over there. very much are looking forward to welcoming the rest of Winnipeggers. Safe to do so. And I'm really looking forward at Downtown Winnipeg Biz when we can safely welcome everyone back to downtown. We've talked a lot about the great unique things here, from the museum to RWB to the art gallery. There's really so many fantastic things to enjoy in our city. And thank you again for watching. Thank you, Dayna, for your time, and Mayor Bowman. Thank you as well for taking the time to discuss some of the challenges that we're all facing in the business community, but it really is important that we're pulling together during this time. And Dayna, Jessica, as chair of the Winnipeg Chamber of Commerce, I know the Chamber has been doing so much on advocacy and really pulling the information together as well to share with information. So why don't you wrap us up for the evening, and then we can all go order takeout from our favorite downtown business tonight.
Sounds like a good plan. I'm really honored to be a part of the Chamber throughout this time, and recognizing a lot of the leadership and the action that they've just been so active, and the team has just been incredible. So I really appreciate that. Thank you very much, Kate, for moderating today's session. Thank you, Mayor Bowman and Dayna Spiring, for being a part of this. Really appreciate that. I think one of the things, and Mayor Bowman mentioned it a little bit earlier, one of the things that Winnipeggers do really well is come together. So we really appreciate the opportunity to come together online. And everyone for joining us. We did have a lot of questions. We tried to get to as many as possible. We hope that you will join our ongoing webinars. There's a local lunch break on Wednesdays at noon, winnipeg-chamber.com for more information. We hope that everyone has a great evening. Wishing each of you wellness, to yourself and to your families. And I'm just going to invite Mayor Bowman and Dayna to say a quick goodbye to our audience.
Thank you for having us, Mayor.
Yeah, I'll just say thanks as well. Thanks, Jessica. Thanks, Kate and Dayna. Keep up the great work, and also just want to wish everybody all the very best with health and business success going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.